habit of checking the quality healthy indicators every morning before I came around. A habit which even became part of their daily stand-up for some of the teams. After only a couple of days, teams began to look at other teams' quality indicators and compare them to their own, which was something I didn't really expect. And some teams didn't like what they were seeing. So teams organically started to make these small improvements and changes without any prompting. A key lesson I learned was that when you make problems visible, people magically seem to act. So when they see these things, they just automatically kind of go, oh, I think we should do something about that. In some cases, long-standing problems like noisy alerts, flaky end-to-end tests and stuff just got fixed by the team because they were sick of seeing it on the board every morning. So team members started to get more engaged and interested in these particular feedback loops. It all culminated one day during our team leads metrics meeting that we, on a weekly basis, we had a meeting with each of the team leads to review the metrics. And with 15 minutes left in the team leads meeting, the team leads themselves actively asked for the quality indicator board unprompted so that we could discuss the finding with all of the team leads together. And that's something that wasn't even usually part of our metrics review. So we have a department meeting every day. It's a kind of like a scrum of scrums. All 65 people in the engineering department attend, and we discuss the high-level goals together, the progress, the impediments, and so on and so forth. So we changed our department's Scrum of Scrums board so that all customer impacting issues had to be placed on the board and discussed. The first question every morning in this Scrum of Scrums with every single person in the engineering department was if there were any new customer impacting issues, followed by updates on our existing issues. This acted to highlight that customer impacting issues were more important than the standard feature work or the next thing we were trying to deliver. So we added an incident review lane at the very top so that every customer impacting incident needed to have a learning review once the issue had been resolved. So actions from these learning reviews were visualized and added to the board in our Kaizen lane so that learning and improvement was part of how we worked. For example, after a minor security incident, we introduced security training for the entire department and a monthly security bug bash that was really, really successful.
So the third part of visualizing the work was the impact of Kanban. Now, as you can see from a lot of our examples, Rob was working as the head of testing, working across the department, whereas I was working as a senior tester in 2 teams. Now, when I joined one of those teams, we began a book club, and the first book we read was the book Kanban in Action, which I still think is one of the best books on Kanban. But Kanban, we felt, had a really positive impact around quality and around some of the things we were doing, especially around visualization. Because Kanban, when you break it down, it literally means billboard. It maps the workflow and the work passing through it. It's essentially a process improvement tool. So it's not mutually exclusive with Scrum, for example. Because it's a process improvement tool, you can use it to improve Scrum, or you can just use it alone. And one of the interesting things from focusing on Kanban and going back to the origins before the Kanban method, going back to when Toyota used it, they focused on quality rather than quantity. And that's how they became so successful in the 80s in the American car market, because they ensured the quality was solid and then they scaled. And that's something we took on at a team level. Because we were focused on visualizing our work, we started to see our bottlenecks. And one of the problems we felt we had was the tasks we had were too large. So we shrunk those tasks down. And that brought us a lot of benefits. Generally, if a task is smaller, you have to do less analysis of it, and it's typically less complex. Now, a small change can be complex, but we're talking in general terms. The other thing as well is once you make something smaller, it doesn't become as scary. So everybody's more likely to want to test. So it breaks down those barriers. where developers want to kind of get involved more in testing, and it ensures that nobody's put off by it. The other thing that we found as well was around our bottlenecks. I must admit, in those early weeks when I joined Poplo, I had switched back to a bit of a gatekeeper, in honesty. And that was a bottleneck in its own right, because if you have a gatekeeper and a team of developers, you're going to have bottlenecks where there's delays and trade-off points, switch over of information, all the stuff that you want to avoid. So what we realized is that I needed to sit with them much earlier in the process and test with them, and they needed to pitch in with the testing in the bigger picture. And from that, we were essentially trading places where I was closer to developers and the developers were closer to test. Now, the next phase, when we look back at this in hindsight, the next thing we realized we did was we socialized the problems. We didn't just try to tell people the solution or to solve them ourselves as testers, but tried to socialize the problems so that everybody pitched in and everybody felt part of it. Now, there's 5 approaches you could take to this. Daily stand-ups, learning reviews, department retros, team retros, and postmortems. Now, I'll touch on 1, 4, and 5, and Rob will run you through learning reviews and department retros as they were at department level. So your daily stand-up is a great opportunity to bring up any problems you've had, to share any issues you had from your indicator board, and even just to make a change to your Kanban board. And it ties in with a lot of the other visualization approaches that we discussed in the first part of this presentation. Back to Rob for incident learning reviews.
Yeah, so incident learning reviews provide an opportunity to distill as much learning as possible from each customer impacting issue. I created a bit of a system that I use myself here based on a matrix, right? So where we run through the experience in terms of detection, impact, isolation of the defect, fix, retest, repair of the data and relationships, and ultimately minimizing impact and ultimately prevention. You can move on there, Conor.
Yep.
So everyone involved in the incident can safely talk about their experiences at each stage of the incident. And the idea here really is, as I said, to create that safe environment where everyone can talk openly and honestly about the experience. It's a no blame environment. And the idea is firstly to reinforce the good behaviors, because things can always be worse, right? I love the picture here. But also to identify areas for improvement. And these are systemic things. These are not like you need to improve. It is the system as a whole needs to improve. And what are the things that impeded our experience? Why were we not able to make better decisions and all that kind of stuff? You can move on there, Conor. So retrospectives, are provide a regular cadence for teams to reflect on the work that they've done. And the retrospectives are generally kind of more associated with your regular work or deliverables than the learning reviews. Learning reviews are typically associated with customer incidents or outages or something like that, whereas retrospectives, as I said, are usually regular based on some kind of deliverable or some time period. And they allow teams to reflect and again reinforce the positive and identify experiments to try and overcome obstacles. Oh, my phone is going off. Sorry about that. So yeah, I can go on to the next one there, Conor. So another thing that we used to do in Poplo back when I was working there was we used every quarter we had a department retro. So it was a retrospective. And it was an opportunity for all 65 plus people in the engineering department to bubble up the issues that they encounter in their day-to-day, jobs. And, it was a huge event, right? But it was also an opportunity for us to hear from everybody in the department, whether you were working in ops, whether you were working as a developer, whether you were working in test, whether you were working in SRE, whether you were working in product design, so on and so forth. Every single individual in the engineering department had an opportunity to speak at that. So yeah, so what we used to do for that quarterly retro was, we wanted to give everyone a voice, even the quieter people especially the quieter people in the engineering organization, right? So we split that big group of 65 people into small mixed groups. So we had a diversity in terms of We didn't just put the same development teams together. We split people from different roles and different teams and put them into small little groups to get differing opinions and perspectives. And in those little groups, everyone got the opportunity to speak, even the people who weren't as loud and brash as me. And that each of those little teams identified, discussed, and voted for their top liked, lacked, or learned. So at the end of that discussion, a spokesperson for that team presented their top choices to the entire group, the 65 people, and we discussed each team's findings as a department. So we gave the whole department an opportunity to talk about their favorite liked, lacked, or learned. So then once we'd done that for all teams, we did a whole department dot vote to identify the overall highest priority things that we wanted to focus on. And then our engineering management team focused their efforts on I suppose, in reinforcing the liked, putting things together for the lacked, and then again, building on the learned.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So again, as you can see, Rob, who was like head of quality at the time, was focused on the department level, and I was working at the two teams again. So the retros will really be encouraged at the team level. So the two teams I was working with, we were always trying to use retrospectives, because there's, I guess, just two ways of learning. As a team, if you want to learn and improve, you can use a retrospective, and if you want to learn how to operate with other teams better and how to work as a department in a better way, that's where the post-mortems can come in, or Rob was taking the perspective of instant reviews and learnings. So at the team level, and one team in particular, we learned 3 valuable lessons to make them better. One was that they'll need to be blameless. And really, until you remove blame from a retrospective, you can't really move on, whether that's blame within the team or blaming externally. So it's not to remove that blame and you actually look at and self-reflect to see what you can change and do, then you can't really progress or move on as a team, either at a retrospective level or just as from a growth perspective as a team. The next thing is, it's really important that everyone has a voice. Now, pre-COVID, when we were all in the office, one of the approaches we used to take was that everybody could take some sticky notes and write their thoughts on it and put it up on the board. Now you can use Miro for the same thing now, but it's just really important that it's just not focused on who's the loudest voice in the room that gets to give their feedback. You know, use a structured format to run the retrospective, and make sure everybody has a way of putting input. And even for quieter people, maybe sometimes being allowed to write down their thoughts is much easier, and then they can express those thoughts when you come to the group part of the retrospective. And the other thing we found was to change it up. Sometimes it felt a little static. So there's a website, funretrospectives.com, and we used to use the different formats there for our retrospectives. So to me, it's the same approach, being what do we want to keep doing, or what do we want to stop doing, or what do we want to start doing. They're the kind of things you're focusing on. But you can just take different slants on that, and that just keeps it a little bit fresher. As well, Rob was talking about instant reviews there. Our operations team was really good at running post-mortems after production incidents, but that kind of culture wasn't in the development teams. So something I did partnering with Rob was start to encourage these post-mortems. Now, the part I helped play in that was I prepped for the post-mortem and facilitated. And also, so we encourage not just like if a team was part of a production incident, but even if there was a near miss, and quite recently there was a near miss on our pre-production environment, and we encouraged the team to run a post-mortem, they did. So they actually even run for a near miss, and it was really nice to see the outcomes of that. Now, the third part of our approach is to optimize for quality, which is basically baking in a quality culture. Now, the approach we took for this, looking back in hindsight, was to focus on exploratory testing, pairing and mobbing, bug bashes, fresh perspectives, and mentoring and coaching. Now, I'll run you through the first 3 of these, and Rob will run you through the 4th and 5th. Now, exploratory testing, as Rob alluded to earlier, wasn't really part of a culture. Now, we were really inspired by the book Explore It, written by Elizabeth Hendrickson, and we think that we both feel it's one of the finest books ever written on the topic of testing, and I'm sure many on this call will agree with that too. But how do you get the ideas from a book like Explore It to people like developers who typically wouldn't read this material? So firstly, I tried teaching it. I brought developers into a room and I talked to them about things like heuristics and mnemonics and other exploratory testing approaches. That did not work, okay? So there's one of our failures from our story. What did work was learning together. And the best way to learn is bring people together, and try to make it fun and collaborative. Now, two ways that naturally bring people together are pairing and mobbing sessions. Now, we had a problem very early in one of the teams when I was working with the developers, and the standards of the API testing was not what I would have expected based on previous roles. So we had an issue there. So we started to work together and pair. And what I started to find more and more that there was a pattern of really kind of three questions I'd ask developers when I sat down with them. What problem were you trying to solve? What's your solution? And what testing have you done so far? Now, at that point, usually, if I paused, I was after acting as a rubber duck. The developer would start to tell me all about the problem, the solution, but all of a sudden they'd start to write more and better unit tests. And that simple approach can be really useful. So if you feel intimidated sometimes around pairing with developers, maybe those kind of three simple questions can help spark a discussion with someone. And it brings great quality benefits. I probably don't have to talk about the benefits of pairing. All the data shows how valuable it is. The other thing we did was mobbing as well. Now, if you're a tester, it can be quite intimidating to be involved with mobbing sessions initially, and especially working with really talented, experienced developers. But the thing is, in the same way that you may be intimidated by the code, they're not as comfortable with the testing. So when it comes to the testing part, that can be your time to shine. But along the way, you're picking up a lot of knowledge around the code. And every day, like, developers make lots and lots of small decisions. They're given requirements, but to get that requirement into implementation, then they have to make tons of decisions. And when you mob, you see all those decisions and you can influence them there in real time. Because that's a much better feedback loop. The nice thing about mobbing as well is it lined up very nicely with Kanban, because basically we had a work in progress of one, because we were just working on one thing together. Because we had a microservice architecture in the mobile team, it meant when we mobbed that we implemented, tested, and rolled out to production in one day, typically. What's that? Apologies. Another thing that I'd really enjoyed from previous companies was bug bashes. At the time, Poplar wasn't using them, so I thought it would be a brilliant thing to introduce to Poplar. Now, how I use bug bashes is it's not like a safety net to protect the team from testing along the way. It's just a part of the overall strategy. So along the way, you're going to run workshops. You're going to make sure you have all your test levels, that you're working together on the testing. But just before you're going to release a feature to customers, it's a great thing to do a bug bash. Bring people from outside your team in, maybe put them in pairs, and get them testing this feature. And some of the reasons I really like bug bashes is you find big problems sooner. In one of the first bug bashes I ran in Poplar, there was two people from the support team who joined the bug bash, and neither of them could use the feature. And what had happened is that there was a special permission for the support staff, and it hadn't been added. Now, this was just the first bug bash for this feature, and it was really good to find a problem like that so early. Because if we'd released that in a more traditional manner, the customers would be using the feature, but just 4 people wouldn't have had access to it, and we would have probably had to bring a hotfix to production. What I love about them as well is it's great for communication and collaboration. Like, you get people from diverse parts of the business coming in and helping out. But what's really good as well, I found, is that when you people from sales and support and account managers join your bug bashes, they go back to their teams in and tell them about these new features that are coming along the way. And it helps your communication around feature release, as well as getting a really diverse backgrounds helping you with your testing efforts. And it's that diversity part that I love as well. When in a development team, maybe you've got 6 people from maybe 3 or 4 disciplines sometimes, and maybe from different countries or different cultural backgrounds. When you spread that around the company and look for people, you get, culturally difference in diversity. You get different disciplines. For example, a salesperson is going to think very differently to an engineer, and you get that wonderful diversity. And of course, you can make them fun. Give a prize for the best one, give a booby prize for the one that's found, for the bug that's found most repetitively, and that can really help. And
All right.
Fresh perspectives.
Very good. Sorry, I forgot about this slide. So a key part of changing our culture was introducing fresh ideas and perspectives into the organization, right? So I think there's a quote: "Fresh eyes find failures," right? But so yeah, again, as I said, introducing fresh ideas and fresh perspectives is really critical. So when we started building out our new mobile platform, as Conor alluded to earlier, one of the things we did was we brought in an external speaker called Doug Sillers, and he's a mobile testing expert. And he talked about mobile testing and specifically designing and testing for performance. We did this before we even began working on the mobile platform. And all the developers that were involved in building out this new platform who hadn't worked on mobile before got the benefit of his experience, as I said, before we wrote a line of code. We brought in one of our friends, Dan Billing, actually, for another thing. So one of our learning reviews, so a learning review is kind of another word for a post-mortem, but a learning review is focused primarily on the learnings that come out of incidents. So out of one of those learning reviews that we had related to minor security incidents, we identified that there was a lack of security testing knowledge in-house. So I set up a 2-day hands-on training session with Dan Billing, who some of you may know, where we had people from across the entire organization, people even from marketing and a whole diverse set of people, ops, engineering, the whole lot, to learn about software security and how to perform software testing. So I also set up a monthly security bug bash that was really fun and used to get a huge turnout on a Friday evening at the end of the month. So another person that we brought in was, of course, one of our friends, Gwen Diagram, to talk about her experience in Monzo as an engineering manager at the time, and to run an exploratory testing workshop with participants from UI, UX, dev, and test. So, again, introducing these ideas to a diversity of different roles, which was really, really cool. So we also used to do a weekly show and tell, right? And what the show and tell focused on was an opportunity essentially to talk about great testing and quality work. So in this particular picture, friend of mine, Lucas, who's what's he, like architect there now, but he's like probably the most senior developer. Yeah, one of the most senior developers in Populo, talking through the details of how he structured and performed performance testing on the new service. So one of our most senior engineers discussing and talking about testing and the value of it. So that was a great way to kind of to lead by example in the engineering department. So that was really cool as well. So we engaged in learning from the greater testing community. So we went out to conferences, we networked and learned together. And I know what you're thinking, most likely this is the least diverse team that has ever existed in the world. Middle-aged men, all white, one with chubby receding hairline. But we changed that subsequently. So that has the diversity of our team has improved subsequently. So we worked on that. So yeah, we've used coaching as well when working with development teams to influence quality, as we alluded to earlier, using workshops and modeling. And coaching is a hugely valuable tool to have in your testing toolkit as well, right? So one of the workshops that I ran with the teams in Populo was an exercise I called a team testing experience. And this focuses on testability. And I talk through the 10 factors that influence testability so that we can reflect and improve continuously. So I won't go through all 10 P's of my 10 P's of testability, but the idea is that on a quarterly basis, we have a conversation as a team about the 10 areas, the 10 different factors that influence the testing experience for the team. We look at whether they're improving or disimproving, and then we take actions to try and improve the biggest testability challenges. So I've also worked with teams on exercises around identifying risk up front for new pieces of work. And then working as a team to mitigate those risks before we even start implementation. This particular exercise I call risk mapping, and it looks at the various types of risks in a typical release and maps them out. And as I said, once we've mapped out the risk as an entire team, we can then look at the various means of mitigating them together as a team, not just as a tester. Move on there, Conor. So also, I did a lot of workshops with the teams focusing on the kind of architectural design of the system. And typically, when we're about to do a big piece of work, I'll go in there, we'll get a whiteboard, and we'll draw up the proposed architecture, and I'll ask a set of questions. I'll ask about risk. Where are the risks in this particular architecture? What would happen if this particular component went down? What would happen if there was latency in the system? Do we have, these kinds of questions. We ask about the worst things that could possibly happen. And then I talk about testability. It's like, okay, so this is the architecture. How can we test each of these components in isolation, and how can we test them as working together? So consider it from a testability perspective. Then I talk about often operability, and you can go back, Conor. Often we talk, well, somebody asked in the comments earlier, what is operability? So operability is all about the experience of operating the software in production. So how easy is it to operate your software? So how easy is it to deploy? How easy is it to fix problems? How easy is it to detect problems? How easy is it to mitigate those problems when they do occur or minimize the impact? All that stuff is about operability. So when we look at the architecture like this, we think about, okay, in production, how will we detect if this service is down? How would we recover that service? Can we recover it gracefully? These are all the kinds of questions we ask when it comes to operability. You can move on now. Thanks, Conor. Yeah, so I encourage conversations, including the whole team. It's not just a test, like risk and managing risk is not just a tester problem, it's a whole team problem. So we have discussions as a whole team. We share models and discuss appropriate approaches in your given context. So there's no model that will suit your exact context. All models are wrong. Some are useful. I think it was George Box said that. But yeah, so the best thing to do is understand your context and apply appropriate models to your context and find your own way. Next.
Thanks, Ralph, for sharing those. It's time for us to wrap up now, and these are our closing credits, alluding to our 80s and 90s movie references so far in the presentation. So just to remind people of the approach we took, we probably didn't realize this at the time, but it was in hindsight when we looked at the way we approached all this, was that we took that approach of 3 steps to visualize the work. Once you know what the problems are, socialize those problems, and then work on optimizing for quality, which is essentially creating a quality culture. So what worked at a team level and at a department level? At a team level, I felt the quality indicator boards worked very well. People focused on things like noisy alerts and brittle automation around particular features. I thought Kanban worked really well to the point that I speak about Kanban just completely on its own at conferences from time to time, because I think it's a topic that's usually beneficial for testers, but also as well it can have a future impact on a department and company level. I think retrospectives and postmortems are so important. If you want to learn as a team and grow and improve, I think retrospectives are best. And if you want to start to grow as a department and learn from those production incidents, then postmortems are fantastic. You can't do any of this without collaborating with others, and pairing mobbing and bug bashes provide platforms for you to collaborate and communicate with others and really break down that lone tester approach. We looked at coaching at the very start. We thought we'd go for a big coaching model. I guess one of the learnings along the way is that coaching is really important. But what I felt was that coaching was part of the picture, not the whole picture or puzzle. Now, people will take different approaches on that, but based on the preferences for how the team wants to operate and how we want to operate as a department, it feels as though coaching is part of the picture, and we use it appropriately when required.
Oh, right. So back to me. Right. So at the department level, I guess I learned quite a few lessons here. Right. So one of the most important ones really was be the example. Right. So what do I mean by be the example? So if we want to introduce changes, let's say we talk about visualizing work or Kanban or any of these changes you want to introduce, be the example yourself. Okay, so exemplify all the good things about the thing you're trying to do first, right? So for example, if you want people to visualize their work, start by visualizing your own work. And when people see things working, they're more likely to adopt them than if you simply tell people to do things. So as I said, if you have an engineering management team, have a board, visualize your work, have a meet or have a stand-up. If you want people to adopt these things, be the example to others. Don't just tell them to do it. The second one there is that pain is a teacher, which seems a bit strange, right? But so people, what I'm talking about there is like people are most open to change when they've experienced pain. So if you can imagine a situation where developers are resisting efforts in terms of adopting some kind of quality practice or culture, during a learning review or a post-mortem, some people might call them, it's a great opportunity when developers have just been through a very painful, stressful experience to say, maybe we could try something different for a couple of weeks. Maybe we could do an experiment and try pairing, or maybe we could do an experiment and try mobbing or bug bashes or whatever it happens to be. So that pain or those postmortems or whatever are a great opportunity to introduce change because people have just felt the pain. They're more open to trying new things. Thirdly, there's make problems visible. So as I said, even with my silly board that I used to go around with every day and ask them about alerts and ask them about rework and end-to-end tests and all that stuff, when I started doing that and was visible and everyone could see it, people magically seemed to start focusing on those things, and they seemed to magically change without me actually asking them to do anything. They started just go, oh, those bloody noisy alerts. I think we can just, it'll only take an hour or two, just fix that. Let's just get it done. That's, so make problems visible. They seem to magically disappear when you just make them very visible. And the last, oh, go back. You jumped one there, Conor. The last one there was, oh, no, go back the other way. The last one was give people a voice. So create safe spaces for all of the members of your team to bubble up their challenges and suggestions, especially the quieter, more introverted people, because often they have the most insightful things to say and they haven't been heard before. So it's really, really important to create those safe spaces. You can move on now, Conor. So the final takeaway, right? Think big. So think about quality as a whole team, holistic or department-based thing. So think in a big sense. It's not just a little sense. It's not just the tester's responsibility. It's the whole team or the whole department's responsibility. Start small. So start with small, safe to fail experiments. Don't try and change the whole world in a week or a month or whatever. As I said earlier, use your learning reviews to introduce little experiments and allow those experiments to show you the right way. But start small. Don't overwhelm people with massive changes because it's just not, it's not going to stick when you do that. And lastly, learn fast. So take time to regularly reflect on how things are going, review your experiments together and iterate on your learnings. So there you are, that's us done. Any questions?
One sec there, Rob. Thanks very much, Rob. That was a great talk. It was great to hear that. And Conor, thank you very much for a masterful slide control there. We really appreciated it.
My head nods got less subtle as we went on. I was like,
No, I was in full screen, so I couldn't see your head. We didn't want you practiced, so I was trying to guess him to go.
So we have the key question of the night is, does this love the slides? Do they reveal the age of the speaker?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
All right, moving on. Now we'll get into the core questions. So Angeli's, she's keen to understand the outcome of the PIRs, the incident reviews. Yeah, the actions that came out of them. How are they actioned? How do they actually do something about that?
Can I take that one, Conor, or do you want
to? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. So one of the key things that we did, and I'm doing it in the new job I work on now as well, is that we have this single board for the entire engineering department. And the first thing we do every day when we do our scrums, or we don't use scrum, so I shouldn't call that, our department-based update, which is based on the giant Kanban board, is to say, are there any customer impacting issues? So that's the first question. And those customer impacting issues go on the board. So as soon as, if you think of the columns on the board, one of our columns is learning review for customer incidents. So once we've resolved the issue, we do the learning review as a team. Everybody involved in the incident gets into a room and we do the learning review, focus on the learnings, take the actions. Those actions that come out of that go back up on that same board. And they go into our Kaizen lane, our continuous improvement lane. So we do the learning review, we take the actions, we put them back on the board. So then we talk about those in the stand-up as well, to say, from that learning review, we took out these actions and we're going to focus on working on these actions now in order to improve our system, to ensure we don't have that we get the benefit of learning from that incident. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that my other question follow up on that would be like, basically, it seems like you're adjusting the course of the planned work to actually give priorities to the issues that you've identified are like really important to address straight away.
Exactly. That's the critical thing, is that rather than going into our learning review or postmortem, whatever you want to call it, rather than going in there and saying, oh, these things happened and these are the actions that we'll keep as a little group, we also want to share what we've learned with the whole department, because somebody else in a different team might be about to make the same mistake. So we discuss the incident, we discuss the review, and then we discuss the actions that we're taking out of that, and bring that to the fore to say it's really important for us not just to develop features and deliver features, but to improve our systems continuously. So you have to have time, not just for delivering on features or delivering on OPRs or whatever happened you work towards, but also continue learning from incidents and continuously improving your system. So it has to be a priority.
I'm just going to, thanks Rob, I'm going to jump to Georgie here. Georgie, you've got a number of questions. I was wondering, is there one that you'd prefer to be asked over the others? Otherwise I'll just pick one. Okay.
I believe the one that what to do if developers just doesn't want to, they are siloed in with their development and don't want to do anything else.
Conor?
Yeah, I can chat with that if you want. Like, to a point, I would have experienced it more in the past, but it's something I think that's changing over time. Now, maybe it's because I'm working in different culturally different organizations. Well, a way I could say it as well, because if I just talk about Popular, maybe I'm not making it wide enough. Like, so one of the things I do as part of my role now as head of testing is that I actually involved in interviewing a lot. And when I talk to developers, most of the people are coming through the process. When I ask them about the topic of quality and testing, they say that they test their own code, they write unit tests, and Cypress has become very popular in that they even automate maybe 1 or 2 tests at the UI layer. So I've noticed a massive shift in we talk about ourselves as modern testers, but I see a huge shift in modern developers as well. But if you're in that situation where there's a developer like that, they're probably going to feel pain. Rob talked about in his summary there. At some point along the way, if they're going to run solo the whole time and not connect with others, they're going to feel pain because something's going to go wrong. And when they're after that pain, maybe that's the time, you know, that they're going to reach out, or maybe that's the time to approach with the help. Because if they're the one who's different to everyone else, and if they're causing the pain points, then I think they are going to go to look to someone like yourself for help, and they will change. So I do think people can change. Like, I think we've seen a whole generation of developers really switch in the last couple of years. Would be my view on it. I don't know if you have anything on that yourself as well, Rob, to help.
No, I think that was a very good answer, in fairness. For me, in the last 14 months working in a new company, I've had to change a culture, if that even is possible, to based on a lot of the stuff we've talked here and talked about here. And yeah, I think it as I said, it starts by setting the example, doing really great testing, people seeing really great testing, examples of good testing. And when as I said, one of the cool things I remember is that I showed one of the slides there, Lucas, one of the most senior developers in the company, going up in front of people and saying, I've taken time and invested a huge amount of my time in structuring, thinking through, and performing performance tests. It's not a tester's job. It's not this, you know, this is my responsibility. I care about how performant our systems are. So,
Thanks,
so
Rob.
fine.
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry. Go.
Yeah, I'm just going to drop, because I know I'm just wary of time and I want to try and get a couple of more questions in, if that's okay. Do you, if this is either Conor or Rob, maybe Conor, you'd like to take this one. Do you use digital automated quality indicator boards? Are they as effective now that the concept is familiar to the teams?
Digital automation, is this quality boards, is it?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess, you know.
It's actually something I'm working towards. So basically, we shifted technologies recently from Bamboo to GitLab, whereby basically we moved all the much of our automation was run there, and now it's run in GitLab to get it closer to the production code. So it's something I'm actively working on. Because of the switch of technologies, that meant that everything had to get shifted over first before it could start to create those one view of quality, but it's something we're working on, yeah.
Thanks, Rob. And this is from Kate. Tips for pairing and mobbing when developers are based in Russia and QA in Australia. Who wants to take that one?
Definitely Conor.
No, I guess a lot of the same principles apply, like in the sense of, no, we're in this remote world, it's jumping on whatever you have or whatever technology you use and having those discussions. I like, in the sense of the 3 questions I said earlier that I found useful is the problem, what's the solution, and what tests have you done so far. You know, they're the kind of, if you're kind of jumping in after they've implemented it. If you're coming in earlier in the mobbing session, then you can even have more interesting discussions. But maybe I'm being naive about it, but I feel as though a lot of that's transferring over now that pretty much everybody's doing remote work.
Yeah, I think one of the things we also have as well is the guys they don't want to give information away. Like, they don't want to have conversations, they just want to get on with their work. And so sort of trying to create that connection can be really hard for the QA guys. We don't have a problem with the QA guys in Penza, funnily enough. It's actually just the developers, because they just want to kind of just get on with their own work themselves, and it can be quite hard to break them down and to get them actually just to talk during kind of group sessions, let alone when we're doing, well, if we were to try that. But I do think we should try it. I think it's something that we should give a go and kind of just, you know, like you say, role model it and just get one team to focus on it first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, I think we're nearly there with the questions. I've got one from Sharon. What size of organization and engineering team were you working with? So maybe you've probably got 2 different ones. Conor, what's the size of the teams that you're working with?
I think our engineering department must have grown to at least 80 people at this stage now, I think. Yeah. And then Rob's with Glowfox now, which is maybe he can speak about that. Looks like he's on the move at the moment, so when he stops running, he might have an answer for you. He's getting his morning run, I think.
Yeah, no, the kids are getting their breakfast. I have to move out of the kitchen. Yeah, our organization is smaller but growing very quickly. I guess we've probably we've only got about 35 people in engineering at the moment or so. Only about 6 teams, so it's a much smaller organization. Interestingly enough, we're remote first as well. So when regarding the last question, it's been a big challenge for me to figure out. Previously, as I said, I used to go around with whiteboards and there's lots of conversations happen organically and all this stuff. Now, in this company that I've been working at for 14 months now, it's always been remote. So I've had to adapt and learn new skills and but I've actually found it hugely beneficial in many ways to do these things remotely. And we've learned and built new skills around that. And, Zoom.
What are the benefits? Yeah.
The benefits. So what I used to find very messy before, when I worked in Populo, was we used to do various mapping exercises, and we get the whole team together, and then everyone had to physically be there, and you put up the stickies, and then sometimes it was a huge map, and then you lose stickies or just fall off the wall or whatever, and you'd have to find the right people. Now with Miro, and doing it online, like you can share the boards easily. You don't lose things. You can get people in for 5 or 10 minutes quickly to join a Zoom call as you're mapping things out. It's just a lot more dynamic and easy to share. Initially, it was like, oh, this tool is going to be a pain. There's going to be overhead, but I've actually found it far more efficient, more easy to do over with Miro and Zoom. And you can start embedding different things much more easily. For example, we use a thing called Figma for the design work. We can embed Figma images in the maps. We can, bring in different things and all into one area in Miro, which is really flexible and really nice. And it just allows us to capture the conversations better in real time.
Thanks for that. Look, I realize we're a bit over time, I think. So let me just check on that if we've got any more time. Let's just. Oh no, we've got a long Q&A. So has anyone got? I have a question for you. So what, like, if you got like so many different things happening, right? Like, I mean, all these ideas are fantastic, and but if there was one thing that you would say to people, like if of anything that you've spoken tonight, this is the one thing that would really just help you, what would be that?
Will I go first and then you can go, Conor? Or
Sure.
Yeah. So for me, the most important one of all is the learning reviews, or the retrospective part, is the creating a space for the whole team, not just the developers, not just the testers and the developers, but everyone involved in taking something from concept to customer, a safe space where they can come together, reflect, discuss their biggest problems, and then giving them the space to solve those problems together as a team. That's the one thing, because as I said, by removing obstacles, your team will just identifying obstacles and then removing them, your team will just get better organically over time. Your biggest obstacle mightn't be testing, it mightn't be development, it could be something to do with product, it could be something to do with operations, but creating a space where the whole team, everyone involved, can have an open and honest conversation, and that the team as a whole gets behind trying to resolve their biggest problem together. That is the one thing that I think is most powerful.
And just to get a follow-on question on that, does that mean that, so the because you had your customer facing issues kind of approach, right? Is that the only place that you had the learning reviews, or are learning reviews incorporated in another kind of approach?
Well, with the learning reviews is just another word for post-mortem. So it's specifically around incidents, usually are near misses, right? But in our case, it's usually incidents, because we haven't gotten to the level where we're doing it for near misses yet. But also what we do is, let's say we break work up by slicing it, right? So we might deliver a slice in 2 weeks, and then we'll do a retrospective, which isn't the same as a learning review or a post-mortem. A retrospective is more based on how the work is going for that period, not a specific incident. So those two things, doing regular retrospectives as a team, as a department allow us to learn and adapt, but also for specific incidents like customer incidents or whatever, ensuring that you take the opportunity to learn from those as a team as well as and act, I guess, is
okay. And from a prioritization point of view, it's like the customer incident report has a higher priority, therefore it goes higher up on the board, on the
Yeah.
you know, on the teams. I guess it goes on to the team's board eventually somehow to
yes,
get tracked,
yes.
or does it stay in that Kaizen lane?
Well, it's both, right? So
Yeah.
usually when we have a department level board, we have high level, you could say, stories that the teams are working on. Then that conversation is primarily aimed at identifying impediments between teams and high level stuff. So they're big picture things that we talk about at that level, and then the teams themselves have their own board, and the team board is more fine grained, has more detail in there. But yeah, we take the learning reviews, and then we take the actions and we put them on the Scrums board to make sure that we share the lessons and the actions with the entire department. And then, you know, on their own team board, they have the same thing.
Cool. Thank you for that.
I have a follow-up question on your question, Anne-Marie, because you mentioned, Robert, that you need to create a safe space. Right. So what's your experience in creating this safe space for everyone to be able to get their voice heard, especially in some environments, it might be quite toxic. And I've noticed that you need to be very experienced as a facilitator to be able to handle these environments. So yes, what's your experience?
I'll let Conor talk to this one as well, but I guess so. One of the biggest challenges I've found, right, is sometimes you have people, much like myself, that like to talk, and they're very loud and they have strong opinions, and then you have other people that have equally valid opinions and sometimes even better perspectives on things. So the exercise I typically do with teams to give everyone a voice is I start the session by saying, as individuals, I'm going to time box this. Every individual gets to write down, a bit like lean coffee, right? Gets to write down what they want to discuss and the topics that they want to bring up. And then once I say we'll give them 5 minutes to do that, jot it down on a sticky, and then I'll go around to each individual and give them a specific time to discuss what they wanted to say. And then once we've gone around to every individual, not just the noisy ones, not just the toxic ones, not just whatever, then we'll give the group some time to discuss all of the points that were brought up. So every individual gets their opportunity to have their say. And for me, I guess, you know, a part of leadership and management is creating that safe environment and being vulnerable and honest with people and admitting, you know, when you make mistakes and stuff like that. I guess I've been lucky in that I haven't had to deal with hugely toxic environments myself. But you know, they're the techniques I've used to try and have more open, more honest, and more equal kinds of conversations so that everyone gets a voice in the team, not just the loud people. Conor may have some perspectives on this as well.
Yeah, one thing I actually have worked in pretty toxic environments, unfortunately. One thing I would say is that I know the trademarks of those places now, so I've tried to avoid it, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I've been in Popflow so long, because I actually sought out a culture like the one that I work in today. But I would say from being in those environments, like the one thing in those meetings is to set the tone around respect is what I found. And that ultimately toxic culture stems often from bullying, that one person will nearly try to bully the team or the meeting. And ultimately call out the bullies basically is what you have to do. So there's going to be people in the room that are junior and maybe are quieter. If you're one of those stronger characters, call out the bully. This essentially is what I'd say, like, because that's what it comes down to. Like, but I think it's really important in those settings to set the tone of respect at the start and what respect means. And ultimately, it does come down to calling out those bullies, because that's what they are often, like, that they're trying to drown out the voices of others and force their opinion through when it's not that of the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've pretty much think I've answered all the questions. If someone's got a question that they wanted to ask and it hasn't been asked, can you feel free to unmute and ask the question? Oh, we have one more from Sharon. Thanks, Sharon. Any tips on how to influence change when dealing with tight project deadlines? Oh, I love this question. And these types of changes are more work or slowing down delivery in their minds. So yeah, they've got a tight deadline and they've got these things, even though it's slowing down work, it's going to slow things down in their minds, even though they know maybe that they're the right things to do, but the pressure of the deadline.
Yeah, yeah. This is my current reality. So I'm living this, but for the last 14 months. But what we have, so it's been a slow change. So when I joined, if I'm very honest, we had lots of challenges in terms of the ways we worked, in terms of the ways we tested, in terms of quality, and it's taken the last 12 to 14 months to actually change the culture and change the attitudes. And in terms of influencing, I guess it's key for people to understand the impact of poor quality or the lack of quality in the product. In terms of, like, one of the things that's been very interesting for me in my current employer is the impact of customer bugs on our customer support teams, on teams outside of engineering, and people who are directly customer facing, and their sentiment and churn levels and all this kind of stuff. So what I do in terms of influencing that kind of stuff, if it's specifically around quality practices, is look for the costs or the impacts of poor quality, try to quantify them and explain them in a way that makes sense to the business. Let's look at our customers. Let's look at how many are leaving because of quality related issues. Let's look at the impact on our customer supports team. Let's look at how these defects are actually slowing our delivery speeds down because our teams are context switching and firefighting. So if we can actually reduce the costs of poor quality in our team, it frees them up to do more valuable work in terms of delivering, valuable features ideally. So yeah, there's analysis, there's capturing data, there's talking to different people across the business, understanding the impact, and then presenting that back to people in a compelling way.
I could have a more concise view on it, and that because Rob gave it's really good that Rob went for the comprehensive view. And like, I think a simple thing I'd say around that whole topic is from the book Lessons Learned in Software Testing. It talks about release, and what I found traditionally in the past is that if the tester is looked to be the one who decides this is good enough quality, or the decision goes to the project manager, there's always going to be a conflict. So when you're more of a Three Amigos style session, where it be product, project manager, developer, and a tester, and let's sit down and have a conversation around it, it makes everything better. So when you've one power broker, or one bottleneck in this whole thing, then it leads to conflict. I think you get a lot better conversation when you have that kind of a triage around it with the different disciplines. And let's say we're adults and let's have a conversation around this. If this needs to be fixed and we need to delay, that's just the way it is. Let's not work to a deadline at the cost of quality. Is the way I view it, and it's a perspective I take.
Awesome, thank you for that. Hi.
Thanks very much. That's fantastic.
No problem, Sharon. Thanks for the question. Thanks for joining us.
I'm looking forward to listen to the recording again and just really grab it all. It's brilliant.
Well, I hope you took notes in the first 20 minutes because I forgot to press the recording button. So
no worries.
You're going to miss the first 20 minutes. I was too involved in the talk, Okay. I've just got a couple here that I realized that I've overlooked, but I'm just seeing if there was one about how do you run the department level retro? What structure do you use to make productive use of everyone's time? I was wondering this actually, it feels like you have a lot of big everyone attending meetings, it feels expensive. And how do you get I get logically, I get the value, and I totally, but you know, do you not get over, do you not get like, oh my God, how many more of these are we going, you know, meeting upon meeting and scrum upon scrum upon scrum, and how do you make it productive?
Yeah, so regarding the engineering one, that was a quarterly one. So every 3 months we did that. It took a total of an hour and a half to do. I guess so when I set out the structure, and I became quite focused. Like, the key with these things, especially when you've got 65 people involved, is to be very, very, very focused and very structured, and time box things, because you can go down rabbit holes and stuff like that. So we as I said, we had we gotten it to the stage where we could do the entire thing in about an hour and a half, once a quarter, which is pretty good for the retro. The scrum of scrums was that we did every day, was actually probably 10 to 15 minutes. Didn't actually take that long. What we're doing in where I work now is we don't do scrums every day. We do 2 a week, and we do it asynchronously for the other days, because they're big picture things. They don't progress necessarily as quickly. So it's you know, we've introduced changes in how we do that there. So it's like anything else. You put these things in place, you gather feedback, or you do a retro at the end of them. You find out what works, what doesn't, and then you adapt based on that, try and make it more effective and more efficient continuously. Sometimes we got rid of some practices as well. You know, some things didn't work. So we, as Conor said, we tried things and failed. We got rid of them, but sometimes they stick and they're valuable, and we stick with those. But we, again, try and focus on the most valuable parts. Be prepared for those sessions, structure them well, time box the various parts of them, and being quite, Conor's better than me at that kind of thing, but yeah, it's about preparation, it's about structure, and it's about time boxing things and ensuring that, you know, we get the maximum value from the time we have.
I can't imagine how a meeting of yours would go over time, Rob.
No, never happened.
I can add to that one as well if you want. There.
Yeah, please go ahead.
There, when the toddler's coming there, she doesn't know whether she'll smoke in my lap or not. Okay. So I suppose our intention wasn't to give the impression that there was a lot of meetings. And funny enough, like what Rob was saying, is what we do a planning review board twice a week now for 15 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like when we run a post-mortem on a production incident, what we actually do is someone does the prep. So I might do the prep for it. So the meeting takes no longer than 30 minutes. And 30 minutes is a hugely valuable investment of time for investigating it. So I would actually think maybe the impression was that there was a lot of meetings, but I actually don't feel that we spend that much time in meetings at all. Like, I know I could go into more detail of it, and it's probably nearly another talk that's all right how we structure our week, but it was basically, you know, it's often an hour for planning. There's a little bit of backlog grooming. You know, there's a very low percentage of our time is actually spent in meetings. Like when I was a senior tester, embedded in a team, even though it was across 2 teams, I wasn't spending that much time in meetings, you know. And some of these things can just be conversations as well. Like Rob was rolling around with his quality indicator board. Like they weren't meetings, he was rolling around with his board and ticking his boxes and rolling on again. Like, so, you know, they weren't all you know, like, so I actually think it was something we always had an eye on. We actually run polls in the department around meetings, and if people think there's too many meetings, we cut them and experiment around it. But we really don't want people stuck in meetings. We want people talking about problems and working together. We don't want to necessarily want them in traditional style meetings where they're not adding value and doing productive work.
Cool, that's a great answer. Thanks for that. No, that's useful extra info. All right, I think Conor's head's disappeared. Oh, he's back with hello.
Good morning.
Morning. All right. Listen, thank you so much for getting up early, Rob and Conor, and really, really appreciate it. I've certainly found this really, really useful, and you know, I do have a recording. As I said, I missed the first roughly 20 minutes. So if you still want that, I will be putting that up on the website. So it'll be available when I get round to it. But I will try and get that up as soon as I can. But thank you so much again. Rob, Conor, if people want to reach out to you, is there any way, or what Twitter?
Yeah, Twitter for me. I live in Twitter, I'm afraid. Also LinkedIn, there too.
LinkedIn,
Anyway, I'm always happy to talk about anything related to testing or quality or software delivery or product or design or engineering or anything.
Fantastic. And Conor, what about yourself? Are you open to questions or people reaching out?
Yeah,
to
similarly
you?
enough. Yeah, like Twitter and LinkedIn. After talks like this, often like a conference or meetups, often Twitter is what people use to drop a question.
Yeah. I've been multitasking tonight. I've managed to get 2 tweets out there. That's about it. So I was too engrossed in the talk, you know. I was like, oh my God, I forgot to tweet. Like I'm trying to admit everybody, tweet, check the questions. So and then I forgot to press the record button. So anyway, look, it's all good. Thanks so much for coming along, and we'd love to hear in a year's time what's happened, what's changed, what's different. So
we're in 2 different companies, so.
Exactly.
Two different
what's going to
thoughts.
happen in 2022? You know, yeah, it'd be great to hear. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Anne-Marie, and thanks for speaking at our meetup last month. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.